Hello and welcome to Synoptic question for A-Level PE Psychological Factors. So this is screencast 3. So what we're going to have a look at now then is we're going to have a look at how the sports psychology topics could synoptically link to our skill acquisition topics. So particularly looking with real importance here, we've already had a look at self-confidence in terms of Veely's model and how that linked to feedback. Now, in retrospect, I look and think that, is there too much on feedback? You could definitely write about feedback. I think guidance might be a bit more manageable. So Veely's model of confidence could be linked to the 4 types of guidance, and also self-efficacy could be linked to the different types of guidance, and also leadership could be linked to the types of guidance. And of course, leadership is constantly about, I suppose, giving feedback, so you could link it to some types of feedback. But really, I suppose my last 2 synoptic question screencasts are going to be focusing on self-efficacy or confidence and its link to guidance, and really important as well is any of the 3 leadership topics, leadership styles, leadership theories, or the multidimensional model leadership could link to how you guide people through activities. So it's really important then, first of all, I think it's a good recap or a good kind of last minute revision on leadership and self-efficacy. This screencast will go through self-efficacy in the first instance. That screencast 4 will go through leadership linked to guidance on that one. Okay, so let's have a look then. First up, so type of question you could get, scene setter here. So you've got confidence as a significant feature, just setting you up here. So confidence is a significant feature of successful performance in sport. Okay, so if you've got that bit on there, that's your scene setter. It's actually asking you. Then it gets you into here, which is looking at self-efficacy from Bandura, and it's asking you then to use practical examples. Okay, so that's our next bit, and then analyse how the model can have effect on performance. So basically, in terms of the analyse here, I mean, really it's asking you to it should be explain. The mark scheme talks about explaining. So in this case, I think if you got it tomorrow, it's more likely to be and explain how these self-efficacy strategies proposed by Bandura could lead to increased efficacy expectations and therefore athletic performance. Now, the next part is, of course, when if you're trying to raise someone's self-efficacy, the ways you can do that is to kind of link it to kind of guidance. Okay, so the different types of guidance down here. Part 2, remember, you've always got this bit here. Part 2, the different types of guidance that can be used. And okay, of course, the key command word here is evaluate. So we know now we've got to give our 4 types of guidance. We've got to evaluate them, so give some positives and negatives. And then if we can we link it to self-efficacy? Now, synoptic questions don't always ask you to do this, but I just think if you know it, if you can, and you don't waffle about it, it just shows you understand the link between the topics that the examiners are trying to propose. So I think that looks good as long as you don't overdo it. So let's have a look then. First up, Bandura's self-efficacy theory. So Bandura proposes that self-efficacy refers to a situation-specific form of self-confidence, similar to state sports confidence in Veely's model, but this is a separate theorist who really has a focus on not the process within your self-efficacy, but talking about strategies that can be used to raise self-efficacy. Okay, so let's have a look. The four key factors, or the 4 key self-efficacy strategies that he proposed you could kind of raise efficacy expectations and self-efficacy are firstly performance accomplishments. So when you're talking about performance accomplishments, this refers to reminding people of previous success. For example, showing a football striker a video clip of successful shots. Okay, and I suppose now if you start to see this, you might start in your brain start to think alarm bells will ring, not alarm bells, happy bells maybe, is to think, well, video clip to a striker showing successful shots could actually link very nicely to visual guidance. Okay, and we'll come back to that in a second. So that's the first bit, nice and easy. Let's get that bit done. Next section down then, vicarious experience refers to an individual seeing and comparing themselves to a performer of a similar ability. So this is kind of for example, I'll put a sprinter here. They might see someone of a similar ability run a certain time, and that gives them the belief that they can do the same. So it could be used in a variety of different activities here. Or you might be a rugby player, and you see someone of the similar ability of you tackling a really kind of big opposing player, and it makes you think, well, I can do that. So vicarious experience, really important, because they refer to comparing, and you might want to change this here, and you might say, right, individual, and if it helps you, because it can obviously help link to guidance here as well. So you could be talking about seeing themselves, or sorry, seeing a kind of a person of a similar ability doing something that they could do. So whichever way you want to do it, and of course that seeing principle there links you again to visual guidance. You're being guided by what you've seen from someone else performing it. Okay, so again, linked to visual guidance a little bit there. You don't need to do that yet. I'm just trying to get your brain thinking. This is why the examiner might well link these two kind of areas as a synoptic question. The next strategy then is verbal persuasion, and this involves the use of self-talk or talk from a significant others, or information from significant others, such as a coach, to increase confidence. So for example, to increase self-efficacy, a coach saying you have the ability to score, or it might not be that. It might be if it's linked to a penalty in football, it might simply be I can score, and then suddenly you can see that is now not kind of a coach guiding you. That's an individual kind of self-talk, remember, which is a cognitive stress management strategy. So you go down to there, verbal persuasion. So you're looking at that thinking, can I link this to a guidance? Okay, I think you can, because it's got the verbal in it. So verbal guidance can be an effective way of both learning and also enhancing self-efficacy. Next one then, emotional arousal. Now people sometimes struggle with this. Remember, emotional arousal just means with relation to increasing our situation-specific confidence, aka self-efficacy, okay, it's basically having an understanding that an increased arousal can still lead to a high performance. You're ultimately saying that an increased arousal does not mean that you are going to have a negative downturn in performance. It's just making sure that you understand that where high heart rate, for example, when taking a penalty, is normal, and it can actually lead to kind of performance. I would say now, any of you have done a something where a skill, maybe a free throw in basketball, a conversion in rugby, or something where you're being observed, you will have had a high heart rate. You'd have had a little bit of worry maybe. Doesn't mean you missed, okay? That could often work in your favour. It's just having an understanding that increased arousal is normal, and it can still lead to enhanced performance or high performance. Now, there is Bandura's strategies. So, of course, Bandura's saying that kind of, majority of these are kind of using someone else, not always, okay? So that means that you might be able to link them to guidance. Now, I think it's important that you do kind of Bandura's self-efficacy strategies first, and then go down the guidance, and sometimes you'll be able to link the guidances to some of the Bandura's efficacy strategies, but you don't have to do that, okay? You don't have to. So I'm just going to give you some ways you could do that. So starting off then, we've got visual guidance. So the four types of guidance. First one's visual guidance. It's the use of demonstrations or DVDs to aid the learning. Do not abbreviate like I have here, to aid learning. For example, a coach demonstrating a pass in football, netball, or whatever. Now, these are most effective, okay? Visual guidance is most effective if a demonstration is clear and correct, it's combined with verbal guidance, and it's performed by a significant other. Now, these, I'll put a number of these. You don't have to have them all, but I think it's important to just say, yeah, it's learning from demonstrations, but it's really important we just have an understanding that, these are the factors that make them effective. Now, of course, this could lead to link to performance accomplishments and vicarious experience, because both of those involve seeing. Okay, so it might be seeing a video of your previous success, performance accomplishments, or it might be seeing someone of a similar ability or someone who's relevant to you performing a pass in netball. So that's how they could link. Now, it's really important that you get your evaluation points here, so you've got to make sure that you evaluate the types of guidance. So this type of guidance allows cognitive performance to create a mental picture. That is the advantage. Okay, this is how it becomes effective. But if you really want to score those top grades, you're thinking you don't have to have all of these, just one is fine. But then if you're saying, right, the key advantage is it allows cognitive performance to create a mental picture. Okay, this is absolutely vital, because they don't know what the skill looks like, or successful skill, or in the case of somebody who's having a goal drought and missing penalties, and they need some performance accomplishments via visual guidance. This might just help make them remember what it was like to score with the correct technique. Of course, the disadvantages to visual guidance is if the demonstration is incorrect, it can lead to poor technique, which of course, if you kind of get in a wrong technique, which leads to wrong demonstration or visual guidance, that could then lead to a reduction in self-efficacy. So let's have a look at verbal guidance then. That's the second type of guidance. Use of instructions to aid learning. Okay, for example, a coach telling a player to use the laces when shooting in a penalty in football. Of course, so this gives us straight in. most effective, or at least links to, sorry, verbal persuasion. So if it's in bold and capital letters here, that is just talking about the fact that it links to the strategy or efficacy strategy from Bandura of verbal persuasion. For example, a coach persuading you can shoot well with your laces. Most effective advantages are it's good if the instructions are clear, concise, and it builds on the demonstration. And it is also extremely good for autonomous performance because it allows you to explain in-depth tactics or coaching points on how they might improve. Of course, the downside to verbal guidance is if these things are not clear and concise and there's too much information, it could actually lead to something called information overload, where particularly cognitive performance cannot process what they're being asked to do. So there's your first two types of guidance. I've put these in just so you have an understanding of where they link. Okay, these are the main bits here. Now, ultimately, though, we're saying that visual guidance, if you show someone how to do something, that increases their self-efficacy, doesn't it? Okay, it's most effective that their efficacy is going to increase if they do it like this, and they make sure they don't do this. Okay, and I think you can see where I'm going with this. So you don't have to link it back to all the efficacy strategies, but it kind of lends itself to it. So then let's go on to our two final types of guidance then. Manual guidance refers to the physical manipulation used by a coach to aid the learning. Okay, so this is the coach manipulating the performer through the skill. For example, helping them through a cartwheel motion in gymnastics. It could be physically moving them into a position to putt in golf. Okay, then you've got it's kind of partner in crime, I suppose, which is mechanical guidance. And mechanical guidance is the use of equipment or apparatus to aid the learning of a movement skill. In this case, a coach using a harness to allow trampolinists to practice a somersault, or using a rugby scrum machine to help them guide them through the movement of scrummaging. Now, these are both really important because these are guidance types that allow an increase in confidence and self-efficacy in a specific skill, e.g. the harness, e.g. the cartwheel, e.g. the practicing the somersault. That links massively, doesn't it? One of the key advantages, but also there are additional kind of advantages such as increasing safety and developing kinesthesis in a movement. Now the flip side, okay, to obviously these is that, I've kind of used the example in the previous screencast, people can become over-reliant and they can develop a false kinesthesis if they use too much in terms of equipment or physical manipulation to guide them through the movement. So it's important that it is moved at some point. So you say here, performance become over-reliant and develop false kinesthesis, which if the false kinesthesis occurs, could actually lower their self-efficacy. So hopefully you can see how these would work. I've kind of had a look at this to see I'll go back to the beginning here and just kind of have a look at where we started. Okay, so if we look onto here then, you're looking at that first question. I think it's really important that 1, you define self-efficacy. 2, you give examples for each of those strategies, and then link to how efficacy expectation can increase performance. And then, of course, once you've done that and you explain them, you're then into the fact that kind of in order to raise efficacy, guidance can be really important if it is done correctly. And that is why that you should have a critical evaluation of all of them. I've said in previous Synoptic screencasts, they want to give you the opportunity to evaluate. And it seems at the moment they are giving you the command word of evaluate that you are used to using. So you are used to evaluating the 4 types of guidance because if they're effectively used, efficacy is going to go through the roof. It's really going to increase confidence, but if it's not used effectively, it might not. So next screencast then, I'm going to have a look at how you could link the concept or the kind of the theory element of leadership and then with the second part link into guidance. Okay, so I will go through those 3 leadership areas, which will be leadership styles, multidimensional model of leadership, and leadership theories. Okay, thank you very much.